My name is Harm Theunis. I'm a security evangelist at ESET, which actually means I get to talk about cybersecurity a lot, about awareness and how important it is to keep our cybersecurity up to par. So that's me. Thank you all very much for taking your time to be here with me for half an hour. I really appreciate you being out here and taking the time to listen to me talk for half an hour. And I'm going to be talking about how cybercriminals and defenders are evolving or have been evolving in the last half year, as in the first 6 months of 2025. I'll be talking about our threat report, so the report that we publish every half year about what we see at ESET, the telemetry that we have, that all our sensors see across the globe, and the conclusions that we can take from that. And I'll also dive into public-private projects that help keep our country and our world a bit safer, and the NATO Summit. So that's a promise from my side. First of all, I'm curious, who of all of you people here are into gaming? That's a few hands, that's good. So I really like shooting games, Battlefield, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, stuff like that. And there's actually some comparisons between shooters or gaming in general and what we see in the cyber field. Because it's the first half year of this year, it's been like a cyber deathmatch, free-for-all fighting between ransomware gangs on one side, and then there's law enforcement on the other side, hunting cybercriminals. As well as a game of whack-a-mole, which isn't like a game that you can actually play on your console or your PC, but we see it at carnivals, right? Whack-a-mole, you hit one and then another one pops up. We see that happening as well, but we'll dive into that during this half hour. First things I want to kick off is how many of you have had to prove in the last, let's say, 7 days that they're actually not a robot or a computer? Everybody knows this, right? Have to fill in these annoying puzzles. You have to show how many traffic lights do you see, how many bikes do you see, then you get another one, and basically you're training the AI models of Google and other tech companies. Or you have to fix this annoying puzzle or type in these words which nobody can read. Then you have to do another one because you did it wrong the first time. Everybody knows this, right? So, and everybody knows that. So cybercriminals know that as well, and they try to take advantage of what we do with these captchas. So they're basically turning captchas into a weapon by creating a vague version of this annoying process which we all have to endure during our lifetime. So to prove you're not a robot in this case, you first have to click the big blue button you see over there. And because you're used to fixing all these problems or filling in these captchas, you'll be like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll go ahead and just click that because I'm not a robot, right? So then you get like a few assignments. You have to press the Windows button plus R, then you have to use the paste command, Ctrl V, then you have to press enter. So you feel good about yourself. You're like, I fixed this problem. I'm doing a good job. Bravo, you've just proven that you're not a robot, but also you've triggered a malware infection by executing a PowerShell command copied to your clipboard. And you don't recall copying this PowerShell script or command because you haven't done that purposefully. You actually, where you did that was like the blue button. When you click that, you actually placed this PowerShell command on your clipboard, and that's what you've actually pasted. So what follows is this. First, a harmful HTA file is downloaded, and that contains JavaScript, which exploits a legitimate operating system tool to execute. From there on, an additional PowerShell script is loaded and run onto your system until, for example, an Infostealer unpacks into your system memory. And obviously, this is an Infostealer, so what that does, it collects information and it steals your data and exfiltrates this to the attacker's server, and then they've got your info. So what started off as a thing where you were like, okay, I'm trying to prove I'm not a robot, actually installed malware. And this is highly effective. According to our own telemetry, this threat basically didn't exist up until a year ago. And today it's the #2 threat globally with a growth of over 500% in the past 6 months. And I'm talking about January up until the end of June. And the bad the bad news is that this fake CAPTCHA is just one of the examples of new social engineering techniques, and this one in particular is called ClickFix, which you see in the right upper top. And the name comes from the concept that by clicking and following the instructions that the cyber attackers or the criminals are giving you, by performing those commands, you fix an issue presented by these actual attackers. And you can encounter these in all types of fake warnings, almost anywhere. Email attachments, links in messages, malicious websites, and the content that you copy to your clipboard is like we saw in the example. In most cases, a PowerShell or curl command that can lead to any number of intermediate steps, but it always ends with the same final payload, which is, let's say, an Infostealer, ransomware, a remote access Trojan, or other backdoors. But it's also always something malicious. So I said cybercriminals, but ClickFix isn't just used by cybercriminals. I think I've got a laser. Ah, that's awesome, right? So you see North Korea right there, right? And so there's also really sophisticated state-sponsored groups, one of which we describe in the publication of our own APT reports. But the North Koreans were actually one of the first ones to adopt the trend of these ClickFix malware. This is a group called Deceptive Development, and they're mostly financially motivated, like many North Korean groups. So every dime that they make actually goes back to the regime to basically fund their rocket program and other offensive stuff. They use the trick in fake development recruitment campaigns to target their victims' employers. And that's part of the IT worker trend that was documented by ESET, but also by many other vendors and researchers that have gone into this in depth. And I'll show you a couple of them. They use like fake recruitment platforms, and this is a fun one, where they imitate legitimate services, where job applicants are told that their camera isn't working. So let's see, your camera or microphone is currently blocked. Ah, that's a shame, we can't talk to you right now. But we've got a way to fix this, right? So you can fix it by using that command provided, and you put it into your clipboard, run it into your device's command line, and basically the same thing that I showed before happens. You download malicious stuff. But it's not just this one. You also see it on fabricated issues posted as comments under well-known projects on GitHub. Once again, this is the same kind of thing happening. If you paste that and use that, well, you're basically downloading stuff that you don't want on your computer. So that's one interesting thing. Another thing that we see is NFC. Everybody knows NFC at this point, right? You use your Apple Watch or any other watch you have, or your iPhone, and you double tap the button, right? And once in a while you have to perhaps use your PIN or your Face ID to make sure that you are who you say you are. And bam, you just bought yourself a new TV or a refrigerator or some clothes or whatever. Because people don't use cash anymore, and we really love the convenience. But we're not the only one. NFC is obviously a safer alternative to magnetic stripes or the 4 PIN numbers that we're used to, but it's not bulletproof. And because it's not bulletproof, that's why cybercriminals are interested in this as well. Actually, there were German students at the Technical University of Darmstadt. They published NFC-gate on GitHub. That's what we're looking at right now, NFC-gate. And NFC-gate is a tool that captures the NFC traffic from apps and then passes it along or relays it to other devices. And then it mimics or replays the data that got sent there. And you know, if there are students that publish these stories, it's actually a useful utility for testing, right, and academic research. But also, yeah, this is something that actually got used by cybercriminals. There's some examples of this. So there's attackers that use NFC-gate in their own custom malware. The first time we saw was N-gate. That was last year. And they combined NFC-gate both with social engineering and phishing. So a combination of the two things. The attackers created a novel attack vector allowing them to remotely withdraw cash from the victim's account through ATMs. And this is an example. It's an inspiration to criminals, right? So there's one notable example found by Threat Fabric, actually, and it's called Ghost Tap. And how it works is the attackers are using phishing and social engineering. They trick users out of their card details and one-time passcodes, the passcodes that we use to better protect ourselves, and register these stolen cards on attackers' devices. And where the NFC part comes into play is that they don't use their own devices for the payment or the withdrawal because they don't want to be traced. That makes sense, right? So they use this academic NFC gate, which we saw just now, to relay the card data to devices of a money mule. That money mule can then make transactions. They can buy stuff on the internet, or they go to an ATM to basically take out the cash. And this is heavily promoted by several Chinese-speaking cybercriminal groups. Yeah, you can see this is where these threat detections that we've seen on our part to these NFC-related threats are situated in the world. Mainly in China, the Central and Eastern Europe at the beginning, but in the first half of 2025, they expanded their reach to Russia, Germany, Chile, and the US. So these are the numbers. So there's growing numbers of these NFC threats, and that's what we see in this telemetry, our telemetry. And during the last half of 2024, right at the bottom there, we saw like one detection per week, right? And it's not that much, basically. But on the brink of summer, something interesting happened because it's been growing and it's up to dozens per week at this point. And dozens per week, while that's still not huge numbers, it really shows us how quickly cybercriminals evolve and how quickly they are to adapt these new techniques to basically steal money. And there's already malware as a service that combines all these things and basically spreads that, try to make money for cybercriminals. Oh, yeah, so sorry, 35 times the increase. There you have it. So I promised to dive into ransomware a bit. So the things we're seeing, and like I said, it's been a bit of a free-for-all market because there's a lot of shipments going on in the ransomware scene, so to say. But first, the numbers. In 2024, the reported attacks have grown by 15% in 2024 to an astonishing up of 5,000 incidents. And there's a huge increase of ransomware gangs. They've risen up to 43%, and there's about 96 ransomware groups. And I think the number is up from 96 at the moment because there's a splintering in this industry going on. But there's also positive numbers. I don't want to get people depressed just now. The payments, there's a decrease in the profits that these ransomware gangs make, 35%. And while the number of $813 million is still huge on a yearly base, it's definitely lower than things that we've seen in the past few years. So that's a positive note, and that maybe brightens it up a bit for us. So I think we all know some entrepreneurs in our surroundings, right? I've got a couple of entrepreneurs in my friends, in my family actually. And I always hear like the smaller ones. So there's a guy that sells glasses. I've got some people who have some restaurants. And they always say that they're too small to be a target of these ransomware groups. But the numbers, based on what we see in ransomware data leak sites, shows us that the most targeted size of companies is between 11 and 200 employees. And actually, the small ones, the really small ones, 0 to 1 employees, they appear on the list more often than the really big ones, the biggest enterprises with 5,000 plus employees. While it does make sense because the bigger a company gets, they usually up their cybersecurity, right? And I think they'll be more fit to handle all these attacks and ward them off. But, you know, people can't say I'm a small company and I'm not a target. These numbers prove that point. There's also 3 other trends that I want to point out because ransomware gangs are equipping EDR killers. And EDR killers, they're basically the endpoint detection and response tools that we use to find stuff going on. They try to take it out, they try to take it down and kill them using custom malware built for this purpose, smuggled into the system via vulnerable drivers. and those are the EDR killers. So that's one interesting thing that we see ransomware groups equip. There's also legitimate RMM tools that serve a similar purpose. They enable the attackers to navigate and control the victim's environment. And then there's data stealing, where they just move on from encryption, no longer encrypting the data of their victims, but they just plain out try to threaten to publish all the data they have to pressure a victim into paying a ransom. And that's one of the things that we saw in Holland in the last couple of weeks as well with clinical diagnostics. I'm sure everybody knows this this attack. We've seen it in the news. So those are three somewhat bothering trends. But there's also good news, because ransomware groups actually got taken down. We know Lockbit and we know Black Hat, and specifically there were two joint operations by law enforcement and the private sector that managed to take down these two major players in the ransomware market. So Lockbit and Black Hat got taken down, which is really good news. There you have it. But one of the things that we know about ransomware gangs is that they're really proud and they really like to brag, right? They really like to brag about who they hit, how they hit them, how much data they recovered. So after they got taken down, they actually said, well, these takedowns, they weren't really effective. We're still around, and don't you worry, we're still alive and kicking. But we see that the data leak sites that they don't have that many victims anymore, and the truth also is that both of these gangs completely lost the trust of their affiliates, their customers basically, and without that trust, there's no business. No customers means no business, so no more money for Lockbit and Black Hat. But what you see happening, and this is where whack-a-mole comes in, if one gets taken down, others come right up. And that's what we see happening. Ransom Hub enters the scene. That's the white line you see over there. Then suddenly we see a Ransom Hub coming around the corner. They experienced explosive growth, which you can obviously see in the second part of 2024. And actually most of Lockbit's and Black Hat's affiliates, they moved to Ransom Hub. Also, Ransom Hub was really active with these EDR killers, and they provided them free. So everybody that went to Ransom Hub was actually really pleased with Ransom Hub, because they actually had an EDR killer which made them more effective in rolling out these ransomware attacks. Sorry about this. Then there's another one, Dragon Force. Around the same time, they emerged on the scene. And if you're not familiar with this specific case, they're the ones responsible for the huge attacks in the UK on Marks and Spencer, and the other one was, I think it was Co-op, leaving both of these stores with empty shelves. And these two huge retail brands are still struggling up until today to resume normal operations. So talking about impact, these two major
retail brands are still suffering from what happened last year, or the past year. The other thing about Dragon Force, the orange thingy over there, they have an unusual characteristic. Aside from their real arrogance, they have no problem attacking their competition. And this is where the deathmatch thing comes into play. So in March, they launched attacks and defaced the leak sites of BlackLock and the Momona ransomware group. And eventually, they even dared to go up with the biggest player at the moment, namely Ransom Hub. But the thing is, Ransom Hub actually went dark last April, and Dragon Force tried to convince, and this was actually really fun, they tried to convince everyone that Ransom Hub had gone willingly and was now working with their cartel. But the heated exchanges and declarations between the two, declarations of war basically on their dark web forums, they tell a really different story. But the fact is that after they got taken down in April, they still haven't recovered after that huge blow. So moving on to something completely different, the little party that we had in The Hague this summer. I'm sure everybody remembers the NATO Summit, right? Huge operations. If you listen to Donald Trump, he thinks it was the best ever. Well, I'm not sure about that one, but the results were really good, right? 5% of our GDP on defense is good, and it's good for cybersecurity industry as well. But it was the first time since the NATO got founded in 1949 that we actually had to host a NATO summit. So we had to keep our country safe, and we did a lot of things. We did many things. There there you see our people on motorcycles. We actually closed down a lot of highways. Airspace above the Hague got sealed off. We deployed 27,000 police officers and 10,000 military personnel just to keep us safe. Operation Orange Shield. Remember that name? It's a good name. But that's all physical, right? And it leaves us to the question, what happens with cybersecurity? Because we know cybersecurity and digital warfare, they don't know any boundaries. Everyone can strike from anywhere to any place on the planet. So all these beautiful, let's say black stripes, the things that make our borders, they don't exist on the digital battlefield. So while these opponents may feel far away, their reach extends directly into our networks, even into our phones, the things we carry in our pockets. So one of the things that we know is sandworm. This is one of the most notorious groups in Russia, the most notorious APT, and they're responsible for taking out or causing blackouts, attacking the energy system in Ukraine way before the war in 2015 and 2016, after they annexed the Crimea region. But even during the war, they are highly, highly active and doing loads and loads of nasty stuff to critical infrastructure in Ukraine. But we also know that they work together with other groups, hacktivist groups that are linked to the GRU. So in the past we've seen Sandworm and Setnit perform like these hack and leak operations where they deployed wipers against organizations, taking out their computers, but only after stealing data, and that data actually got published through the Telegram channels of these hacktivist groups that you see at top. And then there's China. We're tracking dozens of groups attributed to China, some of which you can see here, but it's by no means comprehensive, this list. It's way, way bigger. It's huge, diverse, and really highly commercialized, and really sophisticated as well. So those might be groups that want to perform, and they use these large events as a target. APT, state-sponsored hackers or hacktivist groups, they wake up when there's stuff happening like NATO Summit in Vilnius, where they perform phishing campaigns or disinformation campaigns against Ukraine in particular, pro-Russian messages on digital billboards, large numbers of attack around the Olympics in Paris and South Korea. Basically what I'm trying to say is the NATO is a huge, a massive target for hackers. So we knew in advance that they were going to attack us, we just didn't know exactly where. So the NCSC and other public organizations, the municipality of The Hague, they were really busy coming up with these scenarios, trying to find out where they were going to target us. So in an ad hoc meeting with NCSC and the municipality of The Hague, a number of organizations, amongst which is ESET, raised their hands and they said, well, let's come together, let's work together and be ready to scale up in the event of a large-scale cyber attack. Let's work side by side where we normally act primarily in the interest of ourselves and those of our customers, but let's switch that aside, right? Let's work together because the groups trying to attack us are so sophisticated that you have to cooperate. So we basically set up a NATO Summit war room at our office in Sliedrecht. And for 3 days, 17 private companies came together physically. Others joined digitally, joined by the Dutch police, Europol, and the municipality of The Hague. And this is a nasty picture with me in the back right there. But these are some of the people that joined us during that event. And basically, it allowed us to ask a colleague something if something was happening. And everybody tried to keep things safe, share their workplaces, share data, just to make sure that we basically get the picture. And the picture is really important because there's a similarity of the case of the blind man and the elephant. And this illustrates how limited perspectives can lead to incomplete or contradictory understandings of the same whole picture, right? So if there's a blind man and he's touching the tail and he says, well, this feels like a rope. And there's a guy at the front and he says, well, maybe that's a spear, but it's actually a tusk. And this guy says, well, it's a tree. But if they talk to each other and they share their knowledge, then they zoom out and they actually see, well, this is a gray elephant. And if you do that physically in one office, where usually you have to pick up the phone, they don't pick up the phone, you have to go by email, maybe use Slack, use some other tools, it takes time. And if you put everybody in one room, basically you get way more effective. So that's what we tried to do with the NATO Summit War Room. So actually it was quite boring because nothing really huge happened. And there's the disclaimer, because it could be the case that APTs or really sophisticated attackers entered our systems and we don't know about it just yet, but that's the disclaimer on my part. But during this event, we didn't see many shocking things happen. Everything really fitted within the scenarios that we planned ahead. So we saw fake NATO websites and domains for possible phishing attacks, for the spreading of misinformation, basically minimal nuisances. And then there's the no-name 057 hacktivist group. And this is a fun part, actually. You maybe heard about it yesterday at the main stage. I talked about it as well, where they claimed they took down a lot of our websites, basically, the website that we use in general, or maybe don't use. But the thing is, these websites weren't actually down. They were just down for people that used Russian IP addresses. So this was quite funny. At least we thought it was funny. So the basic thing that I try to say is this is a playbook for future events. The questions that we ask ourselves is, what can the Netherlands learn from this specific collaboration, and what lessons can be drawn for future large-scale events? This is knowledge that we would really like to share. Let's say if there's a NATO summit in another country, or Olympic Games somewhere else, we can actually share how we use this, what we did to work together, and how we really cooperated to keep that event safe. I'm running a bit short on time, so I'm skipping this. And I want to go into the public-private projects like Operation Endgame, because we know this approach works, of working together with public and private parties. Operation Endgame is a collaboration between the Dutch law enforcement and agencies from 13 other countries. And many actions were actually carried out to take down the infrastructure used by ransomware criminals across the world, basically. Just this May, 300 servers got taken down and arrest warrants were made against criminals. We also have Operation Magnus, and that specific one took down Redline and Meta Infostealers, which is interesting because these Infostealers, they're basically spies on our computers that look over our shoulder and take all the information from us, like passwords, the things we type in, cookies, basically everything hackers need to, in the second part perhaps, launch a ransomware attack or other attacks. And this is this is in Dutch, but 2024, we've seen more Infostealers in the Netherlands than in the year before. There's a rise of 17%, and there's over 33,000 detections in that year. The number isn't that big, but if the customs in a port, they take down they bust down like containers and they find a shipment of cocaine, right? Then they have like a press release, 100 kilo of cocaine got stopped by the customs. But that's just the part that we stop. We don't know how much has gone into the country from different sides. So these are alarming numbers. Like I said, Redline and Meta got taken down, which was really good. But the fun part is, this actually started during RSA, the conference in San Francisco a few years back, where we presented a similar threat report. And in one of that, it contained a lot of information about Infostealers. One slide in particular was about Dutch IP address that were used in one of the Infostealers. So someone from the police in the audience, just like now, they raised their hand and like, that's interesting data. Maybe you can share that with us. Have you shared it with us? And we're like, no, actually we haven't, but we could. Let's stay in touch. So after RSA, we shared everything we knew about these Infostealers. There became a huge operation where other private companies joined in as well, and we took down together Redline and Meta. Lumma Stealer, they really jumped in the gap left by these other players, and well, they got really popular, but once they got popular, once again, public and private sector cooperated and took them down as well, with help from ESET and other cyber companies. This is what we did. Loads of interesting stuff. We mapped a load of CNC servers, extracting affiliate identifiers, and we disrupted their Telegram forum, which is the way they contacted their affiliates, which was really important. Lumma Stealer detections, basically, this is the one where they filled into the gap. You see, there's a huge spike at the end of 2025. Sorry, at the end of the first half of 2025, and this is the disruption. This is the moment where their servers and stuff got taken down. So detections went down as well. And that was really interesting to see, and this is the end of my presentation, Lumma Stealer is on the rise again. So we see that the cybercriminals are doing everything they can to rebuild their infrastructure, to get back to where they were before. Activity is now back on the previous levels, or almost back at the previous levels. And this shows that we need to keep going. It shows that why is such a playbook where it teaches us how to work together, how to cooperate, and do that regularly, learning from each other. It shows why it's so important, because this battle isn't over yet. Whack-a-mole, this whack-a-mole game isn't over yet. So this cooperation is really important, not just for a special event like the NATO Summit, but basically to win the battle against cybercrime, so we don't have to play whack-a-mole anymore. And that's it for now. Thank you very much. If you're not tired of listening to me, I actually have a podcast. Thank you. I have a podcast with my colleague Dave Maasland, real good fun, called The Digital Front. It's about how everything digital affects us in our real day lives. Loads of cyber security stories as well, so thank you.